Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're still in our second cycle of 1998. We're talking about a movie on this episode. In this episode, we're talking about Out of Sight. This is actually my first time watching this film, so sometimes in this series, we'll be visiting stuff from years where I actually haven't, like listened or watched or played the game or whatever it is. This is one of those episodes, but rented it on Amazon recently and really had a great time with this movie. I remember seeing a trailer for it maybe once or twice in 1998. I knew it existed, but never got around to seeing it for whatever reason. But watched it very recently and had a blast watching it. I have some notes here about it. We're gonna get through those and then we'll discuss the plot and all that kind of stuff as well. So let me grab my notebook here. And there we go. So Out of Sight, first released June 26, 1998. It is adapted from an Elmore Leonard novel, I think of the same name. Some of his other books and short stories have been adapted where names have changed, like Rum Punch, for example, I think is what ultimately became Jackie Brown and so on. He's got a very interesting writing style, and I have a quote here from that I went through my research, looked this up. A quote from Elmore Leonard, which says basically, "If it sounds like writing, I rewrite it," which basically his dialogue is very it's very natural sounding. So it's kind of even this isn't related to this movie necessarily, but Quentin Tarantino did Jackie Brown, he adapted Rum Punch into that, and I think kind of just the Elmore Leonard source material plus the way Tarantino writes dialogue is just a perfect pairing. Tarantino's not involved in this film, but basically a lot of the dialogue in this film is kind of just very natural sounding. And it kind of just goes back to that quote of if it sounds like writing, I rewrite it. So very good dialogue, very kind of clever dialogue that works. It just feels very natural. So I really liked that. This is the first of many collaborations between George Clooney and Steven Soderbergh. We actually just bring up their list of collaborations here. So Out of Sight is their first collaboration. Then they did Ocean's 11 a little bit after that, a few years later. They worked together on Solaris, then Ocean's 12, The Good German, and most recently, even though it's been since 2007, Ocean's 13. So Out of Sight is the first time they worked together, and then they worked together several more times after this movie came out. The casting on this movie is incredible. And so, obviously, the main leads here are George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. I think I've only ever seen Jennifer Lopez in one other movie. I think it was Hustlers. She's very good in this. George Clooney is excellent. But let me actually just bring up George Clooney's IMDb here really quick. Or it might be actually just been better to see. George Clooney, because I think this was still kind of very early where he had just done ER, but then was coming off of Batman and Robin, which is a terrible movie. I've had a little bit of a turnaround on it. I think it is good in a kind of cheesy way. But let's just go here. Let's see, actor. Let's expand this a little bit. If we go all the way down. I think From Dusk Till Dawn is one of his. That's an outtake thing to Peacemaker, South Park. From Dusk Till Dawn, I think, is one of his first major films. So it goes from Dusk Till Dawn to One Fine Day. Haven't seen One Fine Day. Then there is Batman and Robin, The Peacemaker, and then this. So this is kind of what he was just not necessarily just starting out. He had a handful of films under his belt. But a very young George Clooney, and even in the scenes here, he is just knocking it out of the park. It's one of my favorite actors, Up in the Air, one of my favorite George Clooney films. I have a poster of that. It's kind of in storage right now, but basically really like a lot of his movies. He's just a great actor because he can go from a movie where he's playing Ryan Bingham in Up in the Air, where he has a ton of dialogue, is somewhat charming, somewhat charismatic as his character. And then I think like the next movie I saw him in was like The American, where he plays like I think he's like a hitman or an assassin or something like that. Very little dialogue, but like just like the way he like his expressions and like kind of like his body language in that movie, really good. If you haven't seen either of Up in the Air or The American, I would recommend those. But it's also just a very interesting kind of like going from one movie where it's his completely dialogue driven, or not necessarily dialogue driven, but like a lot of dialogue, to a movie where it's more, I don't want to say introspective, but his performance in both those movies are very different films, but great in both of those. But the casting, let's go back to the casting in this movie here. Let me actually just bring up the cast list because it's an incredible cast. And we'll just go off character names here. So we have George Clooney as Jack Foley. We have Jennifer Lopez as Karen Cisco. Ving Rhames is in this as Buddy Bragg. Love Ving Rhames. Don Cheadle as Maurice Snoopy Miller. Don Cheadle, great in this movie. One of the few times I think I've seen him play like kind of like a villain character. Funny thing is, in the 1998 series we did, Bulworth, he's in that. I think he plays like a drug dealer in that one or something like that. And definitely more like a villain role. I kind of wish he would take more roles like that again. He's maybe fallen into like a little bit of typecasting after like the MCU stuff with like War Machine. But then we have Steve Zahn as Glenn Michaels, who his character is great, just kind of like a huge idiot basically throughout the entire movie. You have Albert Brooks as Richard Ripley, great performance from him. Dennis Farina as Marshall Cisco, that's Karen Cisco's father. He's kind of typecast as playing like police officers. Luis Guzman is in this, and Luis Guzman is one of those actors where if he's in a movie, it basically automatically, at least for me, elevates the movie to basically the movie is better. He makes the movie better just by basically being in it. So he's great in that. Around the same time, it's like Boogie Nights, like a year before this, I think. Just great there. You have Isaiah Washington as Kenneth. You have Nancy Allen as Midge. Keith Loneker as White Boy Bob. Catherine Keener as Dell. Viola Davis as Moselle Miller. You have Paul Calderon as Raymond Cruz. Wendell B. Harris Jr. as Daniel Burnett. Michael Keaton is in this as Ray Nicolette. He's uncredited. Samuel L. Jackson as Hergia Henry, also uncredited. And then Connie Sawyer as Old Elevator Lady. That's essentially like the entire like main cast. But the cast is just really good. Like I think like the standouts for me are probably obviously George Clooney is great in this. Jennifer Lopez is very good. But then on top of that, you have like Don Cheadle. His performance is this character like he doesn't take those kind of roles very often, or at least not anymore. And he's great in this. Don Cheadle is one of the like absolute best parts of this film. Again, this was my kind of first time watching this. Like I said, rented it on Amazon. I'm probably going to try to pick it up on like Blu-ray or DVD or something as well. It was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay and Film Editing at the 1999 Academy Awards. Didn't win any of those. One thing I was going to mention was, we'll get to that in my notes here. Danny DeVito, I think, like picked up the film rights to this after Get Shorty. Get Shorty is also not directed by Steven Soderbergh, but another film based on, or at least adapted from an Elmore Leonard novel or book. And Danny DeVito is in that movie. Get Shorty is also incredible. I haven't watched that in a while, and I probably, once we get back to 1995, I probably will have to do that one at some point. Because I saw that in theaters when it came out and really, really liked it. Get Shorty also features one of my favorite like film like plot like one of my favorite like subgenres, if you could call it that, where it's a movie about making movies. I absolutely love those. But Danny DeVito picked up the book the filming rights. He's also a producer of the movie, or an executive producer. I don't know exactly if he was an executive producer or a producer, but he's in the credits for being a producer. Sandra Bullock was initially considered for the role of Karen Cisco. Steven Soderbergh apparently thought that George Clooney and Sandra Bullock had really good chemistry, but just not. It wasn't a good fit for like this particular film. Michael Keaton. The interesting thing of Michael Keaton is Michael Keaton shows up as, like I said, as Ray Nicolette. Ray Nicolette is also in, and I completely had forgotten about this until I started doing my research. is in Jackie Brown as well, and basically it's the same character from the from Rum Punch. I think it was Rum Punch, and Out of Sight. So basically, like um, Tarantino put him in there, probably like parts of casting him with Michael Keaton, and Michael Keaton makes like a kind of a small kind of cameo role in this. He's completely uncredited, but I like that they kind of have that continuity between Out of Sight and Jackie Brown. Like it's one of those weird times where the entire story is not wasn't or for Jackie Brown wasn't like a Tarantino like original. Usually, most of the time, Tarantino stuff is kind of like completely his own, but he adapted that, put Ray Nicolette in there, and now Ray Nicolette shows up in Out of Sight, which is really cool. The movie came out to kind of critical acclaim. Um, you can definitely see why. It's an incredible film. I definitely need to watch it again. But now we're going to get into the plot of this movie. So we just close the notebooks here. The film does use some of the kind of out of order like sequencing. So like the very beginning of the film is not like the beginning of the story necessarily, but beginning of the film, we see. Let me just bring up the character names here. Foley, I know this is the guy, Jack Foley. You just see Jack Foley walk out of the building, yank like a necktie off, and throws it to the ground. And you see him walk across the street to a bank across from where I was. He looks at the bank, sees a guy sitting at a desk with like a executive or something like that. There's like an open briefcase on the ground. He sees that. He goes up to the teller. He tells the teller, he's like, "Hey, see that guy over at the desk over there with that open suitcase or briefcase?" He's like, "That's my partner. He's got a gun in there, and if you don't give me all the money, he's going to shoot the manager, basically, and do all this stuff." So she empties the drawers, gives him all the money, and he's like, "All right, cool. Thanks for the money. I'm going to go talk to my partner now. Give him a sign that we're good, and then we're done." Goes over, talks to the guy, and then like says something that looks like it would be like a code word or a code phrase or something like that. Walks out, and then the bank, like the person that had the chair was like, "Who is that guy?" And you just realized that George Clooney just like went in there, kind of made this whole thing up, or Jack Foley did, and then leaves. However, gets back to his car. His car won't start, and then he gets arrested like at his car. And then it cuts to him in prison. He's in prison with like Luis Guzman and some other characters. And they're talking about escaping basically before like that year's Super Bowl because they're putting up like a new fence. So they go through that. I think it cuts to Karen Cisco getting like her birthday present, which is like a new like 6-hour pistol from her dad. That's Dennis Farina's character. She gets that, and then she drives to the prison for some other thing. And basically, this is like during the prison escape. You see people basically dig out of the ground. It's they kind of like start escaping. People start shooting at them, but then her and Clooney get into like basically get thrown into the trunk of a car, or in the trunk of a car that Ving Rhames is driving, and then they basically like escape the police. Kara Cisco gets out, and then or like they basically have like a part where they're like, "All right, cool. Like we're out of the car. We have a gun pointed at you. If you don't come out, like drop your gun out of the trunk, and we'll like take it." So she basically like does that, but then it like basically escapes and goes and kind of drives off with Steve Zahn's character. She's trying to get him to like turn over on Buddy and Foley or whatever. And then it cuts again to, so it's implied that George Clooney, his character, has been in prison multiple times, and there is another time where he's in prison with Don Cheadle's character and with Albert Brooks's character. Albert Brooks is like a finance kind of a guy who's in for like kind of like money, not really maybe money laundering. I forget exactly what he was in for, but like just kind of like white collar like crimes and stuff like that. He's getting extorted by Don Cheadle's character, and they're like getting him fish in prison, and they're like, "Hey, like all the stuff that you need is gonna cost extra." And then George Clooney basically prevents that from happening, and it kind of starts like an antagonistic relationship between them. But Albert Brooks is basically like, "Hey, when you get out, like when we get out or you get out, I'll offer you a job like on the outside," which happens later. But they basically get out of prison, and then they are basically just planning this whole kind of like this big heist of Albert Brooks's. Albert Brooks has got a bunch of diamonds in his house apparently, like uncut diamonds. That's kind of the plot line of the movie, is getting these diamonds. So like they end up going from Miami to Detroit to do this thing. Luis Guzman's character tries to get like the jump on, I think, George Clooney's like ex-wife at one point to basically figure out like what's going on. Karen Cisco basically is also at this time kind of like falling for George Clooney's character. And then, so like basically they are planning this heist. Karen is trying to get like brought into like the FBI to be on the like the FBI task force and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, she's falling in love with George Clooney's character. George Clooney's character and her end up like sleeping together at one point, like kind of like they're in Detroit or at like a hotel. But at one point, I don't remember if this happened first or before or after this, but it cuts back to George Clooney is getting an interview, a job interview at Albert Brooks' company, and he's just like, they're like, oh, the only thing we can make you is a security guard. And then you see him leave that building, and this is where he yanks a tie out at the beginning of the movie. So basically, he is been in prison once, got out, did this thing with Albert Brooks' character, and basically that's when the first like bank robbery happens earlier in the film. Gets arrested, goes to prison again for the second time. And I think the second time is kind of like when he is talking about escaping. And at this point, Steve Zahn's character is working with Snoopy. That's Don Cheadle's character about like the bank robbery and all that, or like the heist. So the end of the film is basically a heist on Albert Brooks's house. They go in there, a bunch of people get shot. I think like George Clooney gets shot in the leg by Karen Cisco. So basically, the whole thing is Don Cheadle's character gets shot. Another character gets shot in there. The diamonds get taken out by the only person that ends up basically winning in this situation is Buddy. That's Ving Rhames. Ving Rhames makes the escape with the diamonds. Bunch of other people get killed, and then George Clooney's character gets shot and basically goes back. The movie ends with him in a prison van, or a van going back to driving him back to prison. But just a very entertaining movie. The cast, the chemistry between all the characters is just incredible. And obviously, probably one of my favorite Don Cheadle films. Like, I haven't seen like him play a villainous character like probably since I did Bullworth, and that was the same thing that just came out. But he definitely needs to play those kinds of characters again. Like, the only other thing I can think of recently being like 11 years ago at this point, that I saw him in, where he was kind of like, he wasn't really a bad guy, but he played like a lawyer in the Denzel Washington movie Flight, and he was the guy who said basically, well, Denzel in the movie is basically like under investigation for flying like an airline pilot under the influence, and Don Cheadle's character is the character that comes up with the idea of, we could like dismiss this bit of evidence, like your blood alcohol or the toxicology, based on the machinery not being like calibrated correctly and things like that. So he played a kind of like a scummy character in that movie as well. Kind of wish, but like I said, would wish he would play more of those movies or more of those kind of characters. But Out of Sight is just an incredible film. I highly recommend it. I definitely need to rewatch it or like pick it up on Blu-ray or DVD or something. Because like I've only like seen it once. This is kind of like my initial reaction to like seeing it one time through like streaming it through or renting it through Amazon. But incredible film, great cast, great like adaptation of the Elmore Leonard book, and definitely like well directed by Steven Soderbergh. I again just highly recommend it. That is going to do it for this episode. We'll be back again in a few days with a video game. Then we'll be jumping into our second cycle of 1999. But again, that's going to do it for now. So thanks for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.